We thank God for our Christian ed team. That is going to deal with our kids. Good to see Cheyenne and her family here this morning. And your mom is here. Good to see you. Great. So good to see you this morning. We are in an unusual period in our world and our society and our life. When you first hear this story, you might think of perhaps a story of just continuing to nag somebody for what it is that you want. And fortunately, the Holy Spirit opens our eyes to other things. How many of you, when you first heard this text being written, and it's a pretty familiar one if you spend any time in the Bible, how many of you are just thinking, oh, Jesus is saying, keep nagging and you get what you want? Right? Because the text goes to great pains to remind us that the judge is neither a nice person and he actually has no respect for people. Lots of people in our current world that we can think about who are not nice and appear to have no respect for other people. And yet the woman keeps coming back and keeps coming back because injustice has been done to her by another person. She is not asking this ruler for money. She's not asking the ruler for anything other than justice. Justice. That's all she wants is justice. And Jesus says that her request will be granted quickly, and asks the question, when the Son of Man returns, will he find people of faith? Justice is probably one of the most difficult things to have faith about. Because when things are going wrong, if you are the member of a group who has been oppressed or suffers discrimination or injustices, or even if you are on the side of those people, it seems like time and time again, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, generation after generation, century after century, there is still injustice that remains in our world. And what are we to do as the people of God? I would offer that we simply must persevere. Martin Luther King has a wonderful quote that is quoted everywhere. It's on one of the wonderful walls at his memorial. The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. In other words, the time that it may take to achieve something may take longer than we think, but the world, the universe really does bend toward justice. The generation in South Africa who were born after apartheid ended, they're called the Born Free generation, are now protesting because they feel that education in South Africa is still very colonialized, that there's not enough money for tuition, and even if you get money for tuition, you still are not able to afford to live in the cities where you might attend school, and that the local primary and secondary schools are still, on the basis of race, not providing enough protection and enough preparation for those who wish to go to college. They are singing the same freedom songs that their parents and grandparents sang against the structural injustice of apartheid. Only now they are singing for freedom of opportunity. In the same way, in the United States, movements like Black Lives Matter and other movements are singing the songs that their fathers and grandfathers and mothers and grandmothers sang in the 60s, fighting not for breaking down laws of segregation, but fighting for justice, fighting for the turning back of policies within police departments, fighting for transparency, fighting for good schools, fighting for so much that still has not arrived. And unfortunately, A lot of these generations who are seeing themselves fighting a battle that they believe that their parents and grandparents had already fought. In the process, they are turning away from God and turning away from the church. They don't understand why it is that they must still persevere. They don't understand why some of the battles they thought were already won are not only falling apart, but new obstacles crop up. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. You know, when you hit one thing, it pops up on the other side. Perseverance for people of faith is an important thing because guess what? Our world is not perfect. When I was at Salem teaching new members, and I share these stories all the time, there were always people who were new to Christ, had never been in a church before, people who were learning the Bible, people who were not used to going to church, people who didn't have all the language that we have, people who really just saw in that church experience, perhaps in a word from Reverend Meeks, some sense of hope that life could be better than it was. Maybe it was just the fact that people were not judgmental and people welcomed them to church no matter what they had on. Maybe it was just the fact that someone said to them, God is with you, God loves you, you can overcome. During those years, I found that there were people in my class who were homeless and no one knew. There was actually a ministry within new membership development that would reach out to the new members just to ensure that not only were they coming to new members class, but to be sure that there weren't any unseen obstacles that might prevent them from not only being a part of the church, but from flourishing as human beings. I learned very early on how important I was to the process, not because I was so brilliant or anything, but because one of my biggest roles was to sort of be a pastor, a shepherd to that flock. I used to have an icebreaker assignment the first week, and we built on it every week, and I would tell people, try to spend 5 minutes every day this week just praying or finding a scripture to read. We would recommend different devotionals that they could use, but try 5 minutes of some kind of spiritual practice every day to help you remember the Bible. We have a little memory verse that they had to learn every week. Remember, these are people, over half of whom were not previously engaged in church. A lot of people who had joined as members from other churches, but most of the people I taught were new to Christ. And it never failed. Every week people would come back and say, oh, I forgot to do my 5 minutes. Or I tried to pray last night and I fell asleep. One guy, who I'll call Sam, and I tell this story a lot because it sticks with me. He said, Teacher Terry, I didn't do any of that this week. Am I still sinning? Is God not pleased with me right now? And I used the P word, persevere. Sam, do you know what it means to persevere? We are all human, we are tired, and if someone has told you that being a Christian means that you will get it right every single day, that you will always be just on this high spiritual plane, how many of you are praying 5 minutes a day, my friends? How many of you are actually reading or studying your Bible every day? I don't count, I'm supposed to be doing those things. But even I don't spend as much time in spiritual practice as I should. I have recently engaged a spiritual director whom I meet with on a monthly basis. Wonderful woman, attends a Lutheran Presbyterian Union Church, I believe, in Oak Park. She grew up Catholic. And all we do is talk. She wants to hear about how my days are going. She's not supposed to be a therapist, but she is supposed to help recommend things that I can do that will help to strengthen my own spiritual practice. I have a busy life. This is true. Even more reason for me to pay attention to those spiritual disciplines of prayer and meditation. And this month I've been focusing on centering prayer, where you're just quiet for periods of time. I have a little app on my phone that I learned about at the New Day retreat that dings and gives me a little chime. It's amazing how wonderful that moment, those moments of quiet actually mean. But it's important that I persevere in doing it, even if I'm tired or feel like I really don't have time. Nothing good comes to us without persevering. We all may struggle with exercise or diet. I have a good friend, Leo Davis, who lives in Memphis. Leo has been putting up video on Facebook and Instagram of his sessions with his personal trainer. It's hilarious to me because Leo's 58 years old. Leo's never been really athletic, but he's got all the gear. Swimming, stylish gear. God bless him. Leo is working out, and working out not only his soul salvation, but working for his own health. I would never put these kinds of films on Facebook, on social media. He's proud of what he's doing, and I'm proud of him too. But he is persevering in a day and a time and a portion of his life in which you might think that people would just give up. There are many things that face us in life, that they could be difficult situations on our jobs, persevering through difficult relationships, personally and otherwise, persevering through health challenges, persevering through what is going on in our world. Most of us will probably need some form of therapy after this presidential election is over. How many of you are turning away from, I'm a serious news junkie. I have to listen to music to just get it out of my head.
Cleanse the brain.
I have to do something to ensure that I am all that I can be, to take one step and then the next. As Martin Luther King said, the moral arc of the universe is long. That's hard enough in itself to grasp. If justice is right, why does it take so long? If justice is right, why must I persevere? Why must I persist? If injustice is wrong, and if justice is right, why does it take so long? There are those who say, oh, I'm going to give up. I'm not going to vote for either of these people. There are people who say the world is just crazy. I'm going to retreat to the woods. Leave society and all of its craziness behind. I'm going to go away, not be bothered. And yet, the reality is that if all of us do that, nothing changes. I just ordered this t-shirt from this company called, I think it's Wicked Clothes or something like that, Wicked Clothes. It has this great quote by Desmond Tutu. If you are silent in the midst of injustice, you are standing on the side of the oppressor. I bought it as a t-shirt and also as a sweatshirt. You'll probably see me wearing it around here at some point. Persistence, perseverance, continuing to go back and to demand from rulers, from people who are in charge, even from God, to say, please, hear me. This is wrong. This must be corrected. Ensuring that we go to the polls and vote whichever way you want to vote, but lifting your voice, casting your ballot to ensure that you are not silenced. Coming in from the woods, coming in from our self-imposed exile, coming in, re-engaging, making sure that we are not silent, making sure that we are not even neutral, making sure that we are participating in the move of God that will ensure that justice ultimately reigns. It will not happen unless we persevere. It will not happen unless we care enough to speak up, to move forward, to act, to stand where God would have us to stand with those who require justice, to stand with notions of taking care of those who can't take care of themselves, to care for the world, for our creation, to love all, to welcome all, to care for all. There are so many things in this world, so many times where Christians will try to define what they believe is the litmus test of actually being a Christian. Interestingly enough, those people who limit God's action, and I'll name two issues, abortion and homosexuality. There are Christians who say if you're not on the right side of those two issues, you're not Christian. Well, let's see. I'm going to do Disciples Theology 101 for just a minute. In essentials, unity, and non-essentials, liberty, and all things love. I'm going to stand with Jesus and say, love me, love your neighbor as I have loved you. If you don't know love, you don't know God, for God is love. In all things love, let's start with love. And if you can build me a theology, a practice, a political stance that starts with love and doesn't wind up with inclusion and justice, I'd love to be in a debate with you. Where is it even possible to start with love and wind up in a place of exclusion? How do we start with love and wind up in a place of condemnation? How do we start with love and wind up in a place of discrimination? How do we start with love and wind up anywhere else but reflecting the love of God? I get weary. I get tired. I tell students all the time. I was having anti-racism conversations when I was in middle school. I'm still having anti-racism conversations. And some people still don't get it. And there's a fatigue that goes along with that. But as I tell generations coming behind me, some people at school say, Dean Owens, the marching and the protesting, the time for that is over. Has injustice all of a sudden disappeared, people? 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, there were a group of African Americans who organized for 13 months of boycott of the city's public transportation system. And they did so by organizing their own shadow transportation, carpool. They made sure that if you needed a ride, you got a ride to work and back to run errands. I've not seen that kind of citywide organization since. And so I always tell younger people, you give me an example of real organization, of real collaboration that actually moved the needle, and then I'll perhaps agree that the ways of the past don't work. Well, what has happened in recent years is Black Lives Matter, and there's a lot of misconception about who they are and what they stand for, a lot of misappropriation of their name, a lot of violence that's been done in their name but not by those groups. All of a sudden marching is popular again. All of a sudden trying to corral people to make a visible presence to stand for right is popular again. There's some efficacy in it, but unfortunately, my children, my grandchildren, are not necessarily inheriting a more just world than the one I was handed. And that's sad. But it's not going to make me go to the woods. It's not going to make me stay at home on November 8th. It's not going to make me stay away from church, because I believe in the love of God, and I believe that the moral arc of the universe, while long, does indeed bend toward justice. And so in the meantime, as the old song says, I ain't going to let nobody turn me around. I'm going to keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to Freedom Land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I refuse to be silenced. I refuse to be discouraged. I refuse to fail. I refuse to allow anyone to tell me that truth and justice are not possible. I refuse to allow anyone to tell me that God does not stand for the right, and that because I am a child of God, God will work for the right. I hope you believe that too. As people of God, we simply must be for the right. We're certainly in a land where we believe that there is liberty around things that we disagree about. But certainly we do not disagree about the fact that God is love. And in his eyes, through our hands, through our feet, through our vision, through our love, we can ensure that we prevail, that good prevails, that truth triumphs, that no one will turn us back from the work of love and inclusion that God has given us to do. I will persevere. I ain't going to let nobody turn me around. I hope that's your commitment as well. Amen.